The government is coming under intense pressure to scrap plans to reopen primary schools in England on Monday due to fears over the spread of the new variant of the coronavirus. The UK's largest teaching union says its members shouldn't go back to work, and head teachers are taking legal action to force the government to explain why it thinks it's safe to reopen primaries outside London and parts of the South East. The Department for Education says schools will implement appropriate safety measures to help mitigate the risk of transmission. Here's our education correspondent, Dan Johnson.
Children and teachers were amongst those invited for tests at Charlton's football ground today. One way to help keep the virus out of schools. But will it be enough? Some think things are out of control and they want schools to stay closed. Teaching unions say staff are at risk.
We know that members of our union got sick. Some of them died over the Christmas period. So there is the concern for our members. There's also the concern for parents and grandparents. And we don't think it's safe. We think there should be a period of closure to get those cases down.
London's primary school children will all stay off after a U-turn ended the patchwork of partial closures. So Harrison's got a fortnight at home.
We're not going back to school and we're going to have to do home learning.
What do you think about that?
Not very good because I want to see my friends.
And Mum and Dad have the challenge of finding childcare.
It all seems very last minute really, and it's all very confusing and they keep chopping and changing, which makes it very hard to plan.
Teachers are also being tested in Liverpool, Tier 3, where schools are due to open. Although scientists advised closures could help reduce the spread of the virus, officials say there's no evidence schools themselves aren't safe.
I don't feel they should close because I feel just as safe in school as I would do anywhere. I feel the children have missed a lot of education as it is.
The new strain has come out and what we're seeing happening in London was like it was happening with us. We all, we had the extra testing brought in earlier on. London didn't, now they're closing. I think we should all be just doing the same.
I don't feel like they should stay closed. Our rate's a lot lower, isn't it? And the school that I work at, the head teacher there, she's amazing. She's put everything in place to protect staff, parents and children.
But in some parts of the country, council leaders are now calling for their schools to stay shut.
We've had a sharp increase in the cases. We'll be approaching 500 per 100,000 people in the next few days. And that's following the pattern of the places that have already been told that the primary schools should remain closed.
There's now a legal challenge to see the government's basis for reopening primary schools on Monday. In Wales and Northern Ireland, the return was already delayed a week. In Scotland, it's 2 weeks.
There is a lot for the government to consider here. The rising transmission rates, the pressure on the NHS and the demographics in different communities. It's always said keeping children off school would be a last resort, but there is growing pressure to extend these closures beyond London and parts of the South East. And teachers are calling for decisions to be made quickly but clearly.
A phased return is planned for England's secondary schools, starting a week on Monday, with the hope that mass testing will limit disruption and minimise online learning. Despite the downsides of that, it's already a reality for many children and possibly beyond the next 2 weeks. Dan Johnson, BBC News in South East London.
Our political correspondent Chris Mason is here with me. Chris, we've had reversals of policy in the pandemic on education before. Are we likely to see another U-turn in this regard?
As you say, Clive, precedent suggests that that is entirely possible. And there are two factors tonight which point to the fact that the government isn't entirely in control of what happens next. Firstly, local authorities, as we heard there, making their own minds up. So we saw the decision taken in Brighton. Birmingham City Council are saying they will support head teachers who decide to move learning to remote, to being done remotely for the next couple of weeks. So firstly, local authorities. Secondly, teaching unions. They are meeting this weekend. They are coordinating their actions. The National Education Union, the biggest of them all, saying, well, maybe the solution here is what has to happen is teachers simply have to say we shouldn't go in. It's not safe to be working in a conventional classroom setting. So put those two things together, and even if the government is saying as it is, look, our default position is schools should open, will that actually happen? Will their hand eventually be forced? The reality is there are no easy decisions here, and I think we're in for a bumpy few weeks as far as schools opening and then closing and then potentially reopening is concerned.
Sure. OK, Chris, thank you. Chris Mason there.